as a continuing education provider, initially in Florida. And then as we began to look at all this information blazing to the surface about lymph, movement of fluids through the brain, and his amazing work that he's been teaching from New York and all around the country and around the world now, you're going to see the synergy between lymphatic drainage and cranial release techniques. So Dr. Doreste, before you do the PowerPoint though,
Yes.
can we just take a moment or two just to get your background, a little bit about you and how you got into cranial release technique?
Sure. Now, and by the way, I'm just seeing my PowerPoint on my screen, but if I go up, Lisa, I see the start video has a line through it. So maybe that's, I don't know if that's got something to do with it.
Oh, yes, yes. So go ahead and click on that and you should be able to, there he is.
There I am.
There is Dr. Doreste.
Ta-da! Maybe I'll close it back now that I scared everybody for Halloween.
I don't see him.
He's in our pictures along the side right now because the PowerPoint is up presently.
Oh, okay.
But we promise we'll let you see him big full screen toward the end.
I see him.
Sorry.
Okay. So Lisa, you were saying what? Just give a little bio, I guess.
Yeah, a little bio about you. What made you inspired to become a doctor and then specialize in cranial release technique? I just found your story fascinating. I think they would love to hear a little bit about you.
So I graduated from New York Chiropractic College in 1985 and went into practice in Queens, New York. Hands-on spinal adjustments, very good. I know how to move the bones. Good practice, family practice. Babies, elderly, everywhere in between, happy, but always looking for something, always looking to improve myself. How do I be the best practitioner that I can be? Around 1998, so now I'm in practice, since 85, I attend a lecture, and I don't think we have any chiropractors on the call tonight. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but I'm not sure, again, what you know about chiropractic or not, but basically the way I was trained is just from Gray's Anatomy that the brain and spinal cord control all function in the body, and any interference with the nervous system therefore leads to pathophysiology, and the body won't function optimally. So that's how I explained it to my patients. That made sense to them. It made sense to me. About 1998, I go and attend a lecture, and virtually the anatomist that was lecturing said 80% of the nervous system is above C1, which is really the only area that I was not addressing. I was addressing from C1 down and getting very good results. So that then made me start to say, well, wait a minute, if my job here in chiropractic is to enhance function, then I'm missing the main player here. So now I have to start to look at the cranium, and that's what led me into cranial work. And that's what then in 2005, after putting a lot of different pieces together, I came up with this thing called the cranial release technique. And that's really the only thing that I've been using in practice since then. I'm now in Florida, as Lisa just said. I'm not in practice right now. I may consider going to practice. I'm not at the moment. And then with everything else going on in the world right now, my entire training program, I devoted myself just to training practitioners. I figured it's great if I can help people in my little part of the world. But when I get calls, I'm in Italy, I need a practitioner. I'm in California, I need a practitioner. I'm in Peru, I said, I have to put this and start getting it out there. So we've been teaching, and then I put it all online. So that's where it is now. So it's accessible to anyone in the world, and that's been working out very well. So that's my short little synopsis. I hope that was satisfactory.
Absolutely. And I've seen the before and afters of Dr. Doreste's work and had the joy of being in his class. So I'm going to step back and let him take control with the PowerPoint because, guys, I think this is going to answer a lot of questions that you often ask me, but he's got some inside information here on the brain. And I call it the gift wrapping of the brain, but we'll let Dr. Doreste explain it his way.
So again, I know we're all probably from different backgrounds, and probably you all ended up in the world of MLD by hook or crook, from top or bottom, from other professions, however you got here. Probably because you're looking for a way to help your patients the same way I was. And so the beauty of cranial release is that really anyone that's putting their hands on patients, this will enhance anything that you're doing, whether you're an acupuncturist, a massage therapist, a PT, an OT, a chiropractor, a dentist, a podiatrist, whatever it is you do. In my opinion, this will enhance your current protocols, and I'll explain why. So let's just go through a few slides, and now let's see. Here we go. Okay, so when I first got into cranial work, I went back to the beginning, and the beginning begins with Dr. Sutherland. So Dr. Sutherland, and by the way, Lisa, I assume you're recording now. Are we good?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
great,
we are.
great. So Dr. Sutherland was an osteopath. This is over 100 years ago. And he's the first one to look, and I have my plastic skull, and sometimes it doesn't translate well with the webcam, but most of you are pretty familiar with the skull. It's 22 bones. And the reason why those bones don't fuse together as to one solid bone was the question that Sutherland asked himself, and really no one had the answer. So in one of his writings, he talks about thinking about this concept, why 22 bones? 22 bones that never fuse. Why 22? Why 22? And he writes about, in his mind's eye, basically having a sort of like a daydream and seeing a fish swimming and seeing the gills of the fish open and close. And he said, aha, I wonder if those 22 bones are designed that way because they need to move. And when I first got into this work, I was trying to explain this concept to my patients with all different sort of analogies. Imagine blowing up a basketball, blowing up a volleyball. And then I found this thing which is called the Hoberman sphere. And this is the greatest tool that I can describe cranial releases, in that these 22 bones need to move. Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating here to show you this. But the point is, in virtually everyone, these bones are somewhat shifted, twisted, tightened down, and that movement is restricted. And that movement is what Dr. Sutherland termed the primary respiratory mechanism. You may be familiar with that term, you may not be. But what he said, and I'm just going to read off the slide, it's the system that comes first. It underlies all of life's processes and gives dynamism, form, and substance to all anatomy and physiology. It's the spark that gives rise to the breath as it moves through the tissues. It's the foundation of metabolism. It has both an inhalation and exhalation phase. Now, if you get into the writings of Dr. Sutherland, he was of the opinion that virtually any pathological issue in the body, immune function, bowel function, musculoskeletal function, skin, you virtually name it, there is a tie back to the primary respiratory mechanism. And his thought was, unless you fix that and correct that, then you can work on the leg all you want, you can work on the ankle, you can work on the back, you can work on the kidney, you can work on whatever. But to optimize function at the deepest level, you have to address the cranium. And I, after doing this since 1998 virtually, I am in complete agreement. So let's dig a little deeper. So when I came on the scene, as we may or may not know, there are many different cranial techniques that are out there right now. And I needed to separate myself in this work from everyone else. So the first thing I did was I had to make up some words. And I coined this term, the craniodural stress syndrome. And so when you look at this slide on the left, that's taken from an actual cadaver. Whether you've ever studied cranial or not, everyone I think here could agree with me that if you look at this slide, you'll see there's distortion. There's brain tissue distortion, and there's actual osseous distortion here. The actual cranial bones are shifted, which then affects the brain tissue. And I think we could then take the next leap and then all agree that there's no way that this person could possibly function optimally with a cranium like that if the central nervous system in Gray's Anatomy says the central nervous system controls and coordinates every function of the body. So the question then is, okay, let's look at a real person. So this is my brother-in-law, Mike, and he's been in my family almost 20 years now. And Mike was kind enough to donate his body to science here. So this was about, 7, 8 years ago when I took this picture and we put the dots on them. And virtually everywhere, after we finish up tonight and after we, spend some time to think about this, maybe the next time you go into the bathroom or wherever you have a mirror, you'll go and take a look at yourself. And you'll look at your own eyes like we're doing here on Mike. And one of the simple things I like to do is if you just look at the eyes, you'll probably notice that one eye is lower than the other. In Mike's case, it's his right eye. If you look at the actual orbit, the bony orbit of the eye, you'll probably notice Mike's right eye is also smaller. So low on the right, small on the right. If you look at the ears, now ideally, if I were in front of you tonight, I would have you stand up and I would put my fingers right in your ear canals, and you probably would not see this. I hope that's translating on the screen. You'd probably see this or that. You'd see one finger anterior, one finger posterior. Basically, if you look at Mike, his right ear is inferior and it's also posterior. So
Wow.
when it comes to cranial, in my experience, is distortion is normal. Virtually everyone you look at, from the newborn baby to the senior citizen, there is distortion. And the point that I want to make, according to the work that we're going to get into tonight, that distortion is not allowing that person's body to function optimally. Because of that's happening there, we'll follow down with Mike and we'll just take a peek. His right shoulder is also higher than the left. So in the world of the cranial release technique, Mike would, and I'll talk more about this a little bit down the line, Mike has more craniodural stress, and I'll use that term later as well, more on the right side, which means that the left side is not great, but it's better from this quick analysis that we're looking here. I guess I should tell you now that the beauty of cranial release, and I don't know what you know about me and what you don't, the beauty of the work is it literally takes 1 minute to achieve. It's a 1 minute hands-on technique. Regardless of what I find on the patient, this may not make sense to you right now, but hopefully it will by the end of this. Regardless of what I find on the patient, the technique is exactly the same on every patient, on every visit. Because the goal of the technique, the only goal is to do one thing, to open that cranium and to restore this primary respiratory mechanism, which is happening in all of us right now. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting here talking to me tonight. It's happening, but it's being labored. It's the body has an extra strain on it.
I deleted it from my
try to make it simple. And when I talk to my regular patients,
I don't have to do anything for you anymore. Like, I don't understand what you don't understand about that.
Excuse me?
Somebody needs to mute.
Maybe what we'll do is, if you don't mind, we'll write down the questions and I'll take them all at the end.
Absolutely. They can go ahead and
This way we'll get through everything and then
put
we'll,
it in the chat.
but I'll believe me when I tell you, the technique is the same on every patient, every time. Now, the art of the technique, that's a whole other matter. The art of the technique is getting it right on every patient, every time, because every head is different. And every head is different from right to left. But that's, you go into martial arts as a white belt. You don't get a black belt in one visit. You don't get a black belt in 1 week. You practice, you learn, you research, you practice, you learn. But that is the way the technique works. So let's just dig a little deeper here. So now we're looking at Gray's Anatomy. We're looking inside the cranium. And remember, we just looked at Mike and we saw osseous bony distortion. Well, if you go back into Gray's Anatomy or you review these slides later, there's a lot of these little nooks and crannies. And in these little nooks and crannies pass things called arteries, veins, capillaries, cranial nerves, vagus nerve. So when those cranial bones shift and rock and distort, imagine inside the cranium what's happening. All those little openings, all those little nooks and crannies are now twisting down as well. So I want you to start to see the global impact of this, of working on someone, opening and aligning the cranium, and how that's now going to change everything from top down, everything. This is a real skull that I have. This is a picture that I took. And you can see there's distortion on everyone. I used to always travel with this skull. I had two of them. And then one time I came into Fort Lauderdale, I'll say about 7, 8 years ago. And a week before I got there in the airport, someone from Haiti had come in, and they actually brought a human skull that they were doing some sort of a voodoo ceremony with. So when I came in with my real skull, the guy said, "Oh, we got another one," and they completely destroyed my skull. So I don't travel with the real one anymore. That's why I use the plastic. But suffice this to say, everywhere you look, there's distortion. Of course, because of the cranial distortion, that's going to affect the autonomic nervous system. So again, everything at the cranium is going to affect everything down below, not just the musculoskeletal system, everything. The autonomic nervous system, the lymphatic system, which we'll speak about in a bit. Let's go a little bit deeper and let's go underneath the cranium and now touch on our friend, the dura mater. The dura mater, white inelastic fibrous tissue, the toughest tissue in the body, physically attached to all 22 of the cranial bones. And so as that cranium shifts and rocks, that dura is now under stress. What I would normally do if we were in front of each other is I would take a bath towel and twist it. And that's how I would explain it to my patients, that as that cranium shifts, the dura shifts. And as the dura shifts, well, of course, the whole central nervous system is now being mechanically tensioned. I came from an engineering background, so I'm looking at the body more from an engineering background. So here's a central nervous system actually dissected out. This is an actual central nervous system with the dura. And here it is, beginning in the head, covering the spinal cord, going all the way down to the coccyx. And I want to jump out of my PowerPoint for a moment. And I want to pull up this because in 2015, Lisa and I had a conversation about the fact that lymphatic vessels were being found in the dura, in the cranial dura. And what they're finding is that with the research being done on Alzheimer's disease and the plaques that are forming in the brain, they're now looking at the lymphatic drainage of the brain, which is in the dura, and that restriction of the lymphatic drainage could lead to a backing up of lymphatic and waste products in the brain, which science is looking to add very, very strongly now. And again, which we in the world of cranial release, because the question then comes, well, why would the great intelligence that made this body, why would there be lymphatic vessels in the dura unless the dura is moving because the cranium is moving? So if we can optimize cranial function and optimize dural movement and optimize brain discharge of waste products, that's a wonderful service that you could apply to everyone. And the beauty is they don't need to be sick. They don't need to have health issues. Cranial release is something that I receive on a regular basis, not because I have a health problem, but because I want to optimize my cranium. So, and you could just search lymphatic fluid, lymphatic drainage, and the dura, and you can there's a million references on Google now with that. So let me go back to the PowerPoint.
And Dr. Doreste, as you are, can just in light of too what's been going on with the CTEs and the pro sports, because people ask, is there anything else in addition to MLD that could be beneficial in understanding the dura and your technique in conjunction? It's not just getting the lymph fluid flowing. If all that is tied up as you were explaining,
Exactly right.
it's a matter of unwinding it so that the lymph could flow.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I'm just putting on my air a little bit here because it's starting to heat up here. I'm used to the nice cool weather. It's still hot down here, Lisa.
I'm coming.
Now we talk about the reciprocal tension membrane system. Again, what happens in the cranium stresses the dura and ends up at the sacrum. So again, you're affecting the cranium, you're affecting the dura, you're affecting the spine, you're affecting the pelvis, you're affecting the nervous system, you're affecting everything. And I want to dig a little deeper on that concept. Again, here's the dura. Outside the main skull cavity, dural sheets cover the optic nerves, and the meningeal layer of the dura is continuous with the sclera of the eyeball, so that the white of your eye is a continuation of your cranial dura. So it might not be so far-fetched for you to think that when I work on patients, they get off the table and a lot of them will say things like, I can see better. The colors just got brighter. The lighting got better. Everything changed because we took mechanical tension off the dura. The same thing here with our friend, the pituitary gland. So we have the pituitary in the sella turcica, the sphenoid bone. We have a covering of dura. And as that dura tightens down, that pituitary gland is not going to function optimally. And so with pituitary tension, again, we have all sorts of pituitary malfunction. The dura mater of the cord has tubular sleeve-like prolongations which ensheath the roots of the spinal nerves together with the spinal nerves themselves within the IVF. Okay, nothing new there. These dural extensions are continuous distally with the epineurium of the spinal nerve. So let's just take a look and just review a little anatomy again. So here's the dura, here's the spinal cord. The dura comes out here as the spinal nerve, and the name now changes from the dura to the epineurium. The epineurium is the connective tissue covering of the nerve. It's what holds the nerve together, but it's a continuation of the dura. And that epineurium goes out into the autonomic nervous system, and it also goes out and becomes the deep and superficial fascia. So for those of you that may be doing fascial work, myofascial release, whatever type of fascial type work, you're working on an athlete, you're working on the leg, you're working on the ankle, you're working on the shoulder, understand that fascia that you're working is the tail end of the dura, which originates here in the cranium. So wouldn't it make sense to open, align the cranium, release that dural tension, and then go down and do the work on the arm or the leg or the back or whatever? So again, it's a wonderful system that's designed, and if you can open and align and restore the primary respiratory mechanism, when you see me doing this, this is the way I describe this primary respiratory or cranial pump that's happening. So now the question is, well, how did this gentleman or lady end up this way? When you look at the mirror later tonight and you see one eye small and one eye low and one ear rotated, how did you end up that way? Well, I believe it begins at the birth process. So here's a plastic model of a human skull, fetal skull. And even when I purchased this skull and I contacted the anatomical chart company where I bought it, I asked them how they made this, and they told me it was molded from a real skull. And if you could see this up close or hold it, you would see that the right eye's low, the right eye's small, the whole skull is rotated, it's distorted. If you look at a baby, you'll see distortion. Unfortunately, I just put a whammy on you because everywhere you go now and everyone you look at, you will see distortion. And I want you to now start to connect the dots between cranial distortion and the other issues that they complain of. And it doesn't have to only be musculoskeletal. It could be the digestive problem. It could be the weak immune system. It could be the knee problem. It could be the anxiety. It could be the depression. Cranial release takes you into the entirety of physiology at every level. Let's just take a moment and shift gears and talk about stress. And God knows with what's going on the planet right now, if we weren't stressed enough, we are overloaded in stress. And the way I, as a chiropractor and have been studying this for a while, I always look at certain things when I'm out walking around. I look how people treat one another. I look how people drive, how aggressive they are, how they walk, how there's just an overall level of hyper stress in everyone right now. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be stressed. There's a lot going on. But unfortunately, we get locked into that stress pattern. And I want to explain how cranial release can help you deal with people on that level. So if you've never heard of Hans Selye, you may want to look into his work. He said the cause of all disease is unrelieved stress. And he said the central nervous system is either healing and repairing or protecting and defending. So your nervous system right now, as you sit here tonight, is doing one of two things. It cannot do both at the same time. You're sitting there and your body is healing and repairing itself, or it's protecting and defending itself because of a threat of stress, whether known about or unknown. So let's just dig a little deeper. The human body is designed to deal with what's called simple stress. We were a tribe of people. We had maybe a rival tribe. We had an animal come up to us. Our body shifted. We went into fight or flight mechanism. We ran from the stress. We ran towards the stress. We climbed the tree. We did whatever we had to do to live for another day. That's the way we are hardwired to live and to survive. Pamela Peeke, University of Maryland, says the human body was never meant to deal with this prolonged chronic stress, the stress that we're all under today, the blanket of stress that never goes away. Today, we're in this complex stress where we never really come back to baseline because remember, stress is coming at us physically, chemically, emotionally. I'm here in Miami Beach. I don't know enough about it to comment, but I can tell you virtually almost every block to 2 blocks, the 5G towers are going up. We know there's electromagnetic frequency stress. We know we're in Wi-Fi environments now. We're being pelted with this electromagnetic stress that our ancestors never had. I mean, just think about life that grandma had just 2 generations ago. There wasn't a TV, maybe you had a radio, you didn't have a computer, you didn't have a cell phone. I mean, the pace of life, the actual amount of stress on our nervous system is just through the roof. And so now it seems, from all the researchers, they talk about how work-related stress, which used to be in the old days, you watch the shows, typically the husband went out to work, the wife stayed home with the kids, he came home, you made him a cocktail, they sat, you had dinner together. It was a whole different world of what it is today. Those days are gone. With the chronic stress, it's constantly being in the sympathetic mode. It's constantly having the pedal to the metal, say. Stress is the most widespread problem in America today. It's a major contributing factor in 100% of disease. No one is immune. Unrelieved stress contributes to family breakdown, chronic health problems, heart disease, high blood pressure, memory loss, depression, on-the-job accidents and injuries. That's here from the Florida Institute of Mental Health. So we know that now we have a lot of different options. People are aware of all the things going on out there to help us deal with stress. But I want to just speak to you again back to the brain and how the brain handles stress and how cranial release can help you deal with stress. So ideally, we want the brain hemispheres from an electrical standpoint to be in balance. And imbalance is abnormal. So when we're balanced, when the brain is balanced, the muscles are balanced. When the muscles are balanced, the structure is balanced. The autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system is balanced. Life energy is focused inward. Heal, repair, regenerate. You're in the present moment. Oneness. Everyone's my brother, everyone's my sister, all's right with the world, we're all going to help each other. And that's called whole brain function. That's a nice way to go through life. Unfortunately, when we're under this constant, chronic, low level, and sometimes now high level stress, the brain shifts. One hemisphere becomes overactive, one hemisphere becomes underactive. And now the picture changes. The stress causes us to lock into the dominant hemisphere. And so now people start walking around more like figure number 1 or figure number 2. So if the left brain's overactive, the left brain controls the right body. If the right brain's overactive, the right brain controls the left body, and you have what's called brain lateralization. You have imbalance in the muscles right to left, structural imbalance. Shoulder's going to be high, pelvis is going to be high. They're going to appear to have a short leg, one versus the other. You're going to be sympathetic dominant. You're stuck in fight or flight. The life energy is now focused outward. I'm in survive, protect, defend. How can I survive through this day, through this life? You're rarely in the present moment. It's fear, worry about the future, guilt, worry about the past. Survival, negativity, separation from it. It's all about me, 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 me. How am I going to survive? It's a very different world from when you're in balance. So what I would recommend the next time you work on a client, regardless of what you do, you could certainly, and I'm assuming you probably put them on a table, you could lay them down, you could just, whether you check legs or not, you could just look and see one leg is probably short. Do your technique, whatever it is, massage, acupuncture, whatever type of work you do. Have them get up, walk around, lay them back down and take a look. In my experience dealing mostly with chiropractors, even if they're on the table and you balance them, get them up and let them walk and bring them back, unless you've addressed the cranium, you're going to see that same pattern repeat. So that's a good test for you to do tomorrow or the next time you're with a client. Nobel Prize laureate Roger Sperry, 95% of neurological activity is traveling up and down the spinal cord to keep us in gravity. 95%. 90% of the energy daily is spent maintaining us in gravity. So when someone's in structural distortion, their nervous system is working overtime just to hold them up in gravity. So if you can free that up with cranial release, which you can, if you can bring them back into balance, many times people will tell me things like, my God, after that first CRT, I just was so full of energy, I had to just go walk for hours just to burn this energy off. Probably because they had so much going through life all distorted, and then coming back to near normal or better frees up a lot of energy in the nervous system. So we can take that patient at what's called in the beta state, which is the one hemisphere overactive, one hemisphere underactive, and shift them back to alpha. And this has been done with some different instruments, and some of you may have instruments that you use in different analyses that you use. And the beauty also of this work, what I found is, regardless of what technique you currently use in practice, you probably have some sort of pre and post checks that you do. Structural checks, acupuncture checks, reflex checks, muscle tests, whatever it is that you might do, all of those are valid here with CRT. So you could do whatever test that you're using, do the CRT. Once you learn how to do it, go back and check. And if you did it right, I'm expecting improvement, regardless of the technique. Regardless of the technique. So the goal then is to take that patient, regardless of where you are in the world right now. If I came to your hometown and I were going to open up in your office with you, or I were going to open up down the block, this is the poster that I would put up on my wall. This is the poster that I would take out into the community. And this is how I explain CRT. And I would say, Mary, ideally, I'd like you to be that lady in the middle. When you're in the middle, your brain hemispheres are balanced. When the brain is balanced, the muscles balance. When the muscles are balanced, the structure's balanced. When the structure's balanced, your body is healing, repairing, and regenerating. That's the way you're supposed to go through life. The problem is, because of this constant, chronic, low-level stress, and sometimes, usually when I explain that, they say, I don't have low-level stress, I have high-level stress, doc. You don't know what it's like to live in my world with my kids and my husband and my job and my this and my that. So chances are they're going to be figure number 1 or figure number 3. So then I would put them on the table. I would check their leg. One leg is going to be short. One pelvis is going to be high. One shoulder is going to be high. They're going to be figure 1 or figure 3. I'm going to apply the CRT, bring them back into the middle. And if I can explain this correct, now I'll talk to them about this on every visit until I understand and I'm clear that they understand. And if I explain this right, I'll know I got it right, because on their next visit, they'll bring the husband or the kids or the coworker, because who in God's world wouldn't want to be the person in the middle and live there and be there on a regular basis? Now, then she'll say, okay, well, how do you keep me there in the middle? I say, well, then we have to figure out how often you sort of blow a fuse and go to figure 1 or figure 3. And that might be, I need to see you once a week for a while. It might be every 2 weeks. It might be every month. You know, life is different in Miami Beach than it might be in a farm in Illinois. Or that might be where my wife's family's from in a small town in Peru. The stresses are very different. The last time I went to Peru, just to tell you a true story, we were there, we went to a small town where my wife's grandparents are from. And there was an elderly lady there that suffered terrible with Parkinson's. And I could tell stories all night long, and I don't want to do that with you. But I just want to tell you one story. I was there. We had dinner in the restaurant. There's grandma in the back, sitting in the corner, just shaking away. She's been to the doctors. There's nothing that can be done. She's just shaking away. I told them what I do. Would you look at grandma? Sure. We put her on a picnic table right there outside the restaurant. It was a little outdoor restaurant. I did the CRT. I said, good luck. The sad thing was there's no one in Peru that does this work. We left. We realized we left a sweater in the restaurant. We came back 3 hours later. God is my witness. There's grandma sitting there, no tremors, 3 hours later. And the only thing I did was this 1 minute technique. Now, if I were there with her in her town, I would work on her on a regular basis, like I get worked on a regular basis, like I believe everyone should get worked on a regular basis, for the simple reason to keep you in the middle, to keep the brain as balanced as possible. And when should we do this? The sooner the better. The sooner the better. So you could do this to a child right after delivery. There's a pediatric version of this technique. But even better than that, I would work on mommy while she's pregnant. Because while mommy's pregnant, if she's figure number 1 or number 3, her pelvis is distorted, her uterus is distorted, that baby's growing up in a tightened, warped environment. The birth process is going to be more difficult. Labor and delivery is going to be more difficult if you're figure 1 or 3. So I would want to get to mommy while she's pregnant, and even better than that, I'd want to get to mommy and daddy before conception. So that's the big picture. To me, everyone benefits by having regular CRT for one reason, to keep them in the middle. And that's it. If you explain this to them, very simple, they get it. People get it. They're looking for this. It makes sense to them. So this thing called the craniodural stress, we apply this 1 minute global anatomical release. We're changing anatomy to change physiology. That's how we're going about this. We're going about it by working on the cranium, stabilizing the spine, extremity release, myofascial release. From the neurological side, peripheral nerves, cranial nerves, autonomic balance, improved health and well-being is the outcome, regardless of the condition that they come in. I'm a chiropractor. Very early in my career, I was trained to explain to patients, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't write prescriptions. I don't treat disease. I want to enhance function so that your body works better. If you want medication and that arm of medicine, that's somebody else, and we can do it in conjunction. That's great. My job is to clear the nervous system so that your body functions optimally, period. So the benefits of adding this to your practice, regardless of the type of practitioner you are, you're going to offer a unique service to the community. Chances are, the last time I checked, there's 1,200 practitioners on the planet of 7.5 billion people. I think there's enough people to go around, right? You're going to offer a unique service to your community, effective care for a wider variety of patient conditions. You can just add it in. You don't have to change anything that you're currently doing. It'll take 1 minute to do, regardless of what you're currently doing now. It'll open up this whole concept of dealing with patients with stress. So if you are dealing with patients with musculoskeletal issues, the ones that, oh, doc, I'll be back when it hurts again. I'll be back when it's out. You know, when my neck's out, I'll come see you again. No. That's not how this works. You're constantly under stress. You're constantly under gravity. You need this done on a regular basis. Larry might need it less than Lisa, might need it less than my wife, might need it more than my cousin. Everyone's different. There are some testing protocols that I teach you in the program to determine how often someone needs this if they want to optimize function. The beauty is you cannot overdo it. If you're married, if you have children, if you have grandchildren, if you have mom in the nursing home, you could do this to someone every single day. There is no contraindications to doing this other than someone with a fresh acute cranial fracture or an acute cervical spine fracture. If they had that 10 years ago, that's not a contraindication. The only contraindication to applying this work is an acute fracture. Someone comes in from a whiplash, that's not a contraindication. Someone comes in that fell down a flight of steps, that's not a contraindication unless there's a cranial or cervical spine fracture. Improve more efficient office visits. Many people that are using cranial release have moved to a completely cash practice. I don't know who I'm dealing with. I don't know, if you work with insurance or you just do cash, I don't know. Cranial release can very easily take you into a cash practice if that's something you want. Improved health for you and your family. It makes practice fun again. It takes the dull and drudgery out of practice because you're seeing the nervous system come back to life. You're seeing things change the thing I hear from my practitioners all the time, hey doc, I didn't realize by working here up in the head, I really could affect someone's ankle that's always giving them trouble, or affecting how their bunions bother them on their foot, or affecting them how the knee is, or affecting their bowel issue, or affecting their anxiety or their phobias. You are into the totality of the nervous system with this work. The totality of what makes you, you will improve function when you optimize the cranial and this whole concept of the primary respiratory mechanism. I have a million, different testimonials from practitioners. This is a chiropractor. He's probably got the largest practice in the world right now in St. Louis, Missouri. And he said he just can't do it without cranial release. If anybody wants to call Eric Naputi, and I have all these names, so if you want to talk to me after the class or email me and go to my website, all these people are up there. Jane Jones is an acupuncturist, massage therapist. If you go right down to the bottom, it's a joy to see the ease CRT brings to bodies and minds, the sparkles in people's eyes. She would never want to go back into practice without CRT again. I mean, she's done it all. And it's amazing how I find senior practitioners in practice, 34, I'm in practice 35 years. I'm still a kid to a lot of the people that I've taught over the years. You know, the ones in practice 40, 50, 60 years, still looking for the key. They always say, I'm looking for that skeleton key to open up the lock. Well, to me, the lock is CRT to open this cranium and it's enhance everything else that you're currently doing. You don't have to throw out what you're doing. I'm suggesting you just add this in. I put this one up specifically and then I'm done. This is just a fabulous one. This is Lisa. Lisa's a massage therapist over in the Tampa area in Florida. The most amazing thing, CRT, but her story is very interesting. After taking the class, I found my thinking process to be clear and I felt more creative. I then decided to brush off a manuscript that I started years before and began to edit my work. She told this to the class. She said the story was based on a dream I had years ago. And she had this dream. She kind of wrote about it, put it away. And here we go. She has now written the first book. And since she gave me this, she's written the second book based on this dream that she had. She said it just came right to the forefront. The whole story just came right out. And I just sat in front of the typewriter and out it came. So it enhanced her creative ability, her creative juices. We've heard of people, you know, when you hear these great, you hear of the Vivaldis, the Bachs, the Beethovens, they would hear the whole symphony in one note, they said, and I would just rush to write it all down, write it all down. We don't hear that much anymore about people. It seems like our creative juices have been sort of shut down. And I've heard these types of stories from a number of people after they release after you release the cranium, because remember, you've all heard of, you know, the trauma that's, if you're all working on musculoskeletal, you've heard of the trauma in the tissue and this and that. By working on the cranium, releasing the dura, all sorts of these things will come out of people. You know, the layers of the onion, we've heard all these different analogies. In addition to that, it's obviously going to help your MLD practice. Obviously, it's going to just help everything that you're currently doing. And the last one, some of you may know Matt. He's been doing a lot of continuing ed seminars. He's a massage therapist and a naturopath. He wouldn't go into practice without CRT any longer. So I think that's all I want to say, Lisa. Everything's online. There's 8 modules. If you decide to join us, you'll learn in the modules, the adult, the pediatric, the seated technique, the hospital bed technique. You'll learn everything there is to know about the technique from me in these 8 modules that I recorded. You'll learn every aspect of the technique. You'll learn how to do the testing protocols that I like, but you can use whatever test you like. You'll learn how to explain it to patients. Use the code MLD to save yourself some money if you decide to do this. In addition to that, we'll throw in a couple bonuses. You'll get a whole manual that takes you through everything as well. You'll get a PowerPoint program to explain this to patients. And in addition to that, you get 100 of the patient brochures so you can start handing these out, go out into your community. I want to just come out from here, and I just would recommend when you get time, go to my website, which is cranialrelease.com. And when you go to cranialrelease.com, there's 2 buttons that you should really click on. One is, you click on everything, obviously. One is go and order the free report so I can send you some information and you'll be in the database. And then the other one is the online training program, which is how do you actually learn this? What's the modules all about? I have another video for you there. And you can just follow through in this and join up if you're interested. You always will have access to me. I'm very easy to get to. If you dial the number on the website, I'm the guy who picks up the phone. It rings to my cell phone. I'm very easy. If you're telling me, hey, I'm having trouble with module 6. I don't understand how to do the pediatric technique. I'm having trouble. You call me with technology. I can do the best I can from wherever you are, where I am with the computer. I'm happy to say I haven't had anyone that's purchased the program that's called me up and say, hey, doc, I want a refund. It doesn't work. I'm not interested. So, you know, maybe it's for you, maybe it's not. I just wanted to extend what this is to you and do the best I can to help you, however I can. So with
Dr.
that, I don't know, if you
Doreste.
want to take a 5-minute break, and if we have any questions, if we do, fine. Maybe I'll just take a run to the men's room and we can go from there.
Absolutely, Dr. Doreste. So if you want to take 5, there's some questions here,
Okay.
and that's fine. And I'm just going to share with them my testimony of when you worked
Okay.
on me
Great.
when I first met you.
So I'm going to, I guess I won't do much. I'll kind of leave this here, but you can all see me anyway. And I guess we'll just leave it here in case I need to go back and show anybody anything, but you can all see me as well because I can see myself. So I guess if I can see me, you can see me. So I'll be back in 5, okay?
Okay. So guys, I know you enjoyed hearing all that information. Dr. Doreste is going to answer some of those questions you put in the chat. I met him some years ago in Florida with the Florida State Massage Therapy Association, and I had just had not 1, but 2 car accidents. And all I had was lymphatic drainage and chiropractic services. But I tell you what, I had a chronic problem with my shoulder, and it was a real problem because I could not turn my head to the left. I couldn't look over my shoulder if I was driving without having to turn my whole body. And I know that he was talking about this technique, and I was wrapping my mind around it as you are. And then he had me become his demo. And he did his technique, the cranial release technique on me. It only took minutes of time. And the first thing I noticed was when I got in the car and I had to back out of the driveway, that I was able to turn my head, my range of motion, and there was no pain. And I wasn't using my whole body. I was actually using my neck for the first time in months. And I said, what is to this technique that I need to understand it better? And now we've watched over these years, and especially now because you're asking about the NFL, you're asking about what's going on with COVID. Yeah, the lymph system is a great part of it, but those lymph vessels are encased in a brain that's also encased in a tissue. And this is what he's talking about. And I've actually taken the certification course and I loved it. And I do use the information. And you're going to see some of this as we start doing more master level studies. As you're looking into 2021, this is the deep dive that we all need to take. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions that I saw in the chat. And then I'm going to let him go into some of those deeper ones. And we thank you for putting your comments in. And Chris, I totally agree with you. Chris Bridell was saying nobody is symmetrical. And that's true. Nobody really is until they get some help. But just before we got on this week with Dr. Doreste, I wanted him to see a picture of one of my instructors online because I've been online learning too. And this gentleman's eye, his left eye, was so small and so shut, and the other one is very wide. And from taking his course, I began to understand things, and I knew that this man was not feeling well, and I could see it week to week. And I remember telling my daughter, I said, it won't be long before he has to come offline. He's not feeling good. There's a lot you can tell just by looking at someone and from the assessment tools Dr. Doreste gives you. And sure enough, he became sick and we just had some substitutes. So it's amazing, even online where we're all at right now, what we can tell and learn by having really good assessment tools. I know Mary Ellen, we're going to ask him, is this technique beneficial for those suffering with migraine? We're going to ask him that one. And also, how does cranial sacral therapy, how is that different than cranial release? That's a good question. How do we market and charge for this?
Ah,
So perfect timing.
yes,
Dr. Doreste, I was just going over some of the questions for you.
sure.
And Mary Ellen was asking, is this technique beneficial for those suffering with migraines, including vestibular migraines?
Yes, I have seen wonderful results with all types of headaches, including migraines. Again, though, the patient, I'm sure if you look at that patient with the migraine, you're going to see what we saw with Mike. You're going to see something like that, you know, on one form or another. And so, again, with the application of the CRT, now, if we talk about Mike a little bit here, if Mike came to me and was complaining of migraines, it wouldn't surprise me if most of his migraine issues were right-sided. As a matter of fact, as you're sitting there tonight and you think about your own health history,
Yeah.
your aches, your pains, your distortions, your dysfunctions, whatever it is, most of us probably would say, gee, when I think of it, more things are on the right or more are on the left. And I'm saying that that is secondary to the cranium. So headaches, fabulous, TMJ, fabulous. You know, I mean, we can go through the whole list, but at the end of the day, you're going to enhance everything by enhancing the cranium. So
Can
the
I
short
just,
answer is, have I seen good results with migraines? 100%, yes.
can I just add to that too? Can you
What was
hear?
that?
I just wanted to ask, because I have vestibular migraine and I
Yes.
actually do the lymph drainage on myself, like on my head, and it helps with my
Yeah.
migraines. And I know migraine is really a nervous system issue. So now as I'm listening to you, it makes complete sense to me how this would help.
And I'm glad you just brought that up because I wanted to just make one thing clear. Unfortunately, you cannot do this to yourself.
Okay.
You know, in different techniques, we can work on ourselves. In my experience, you cannot. So you'd have to find someone, I don't know where you are, but you have to find someone to do this if you're going to have it done. Or if you have another practitioner that's close to you, maybe you both learn it and you can work with each other. So that's another option.
And you have a list of practitioners on your site.
That is correct. Yes, they're on the website, craniodural.com.
And then Dr. Doreste, they're also asking, how does this technique differ from cranial sacral therapy? Because
Right.
I know the verbiage sounds the same, but it's different.
It's different. And again, I've never, you know, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I've never taken any other cranial techniques like a craniosacral therapy. But as you might imagine, over the years, 1,000 practitioners, they've done everything. So my students, and now especially since I did a lot of classes back in Florida, and since the Upledger Institute is here in West Palm Beach, obviously a lot of my practitioners are masters at craniosacral therapy. So I would say to them, well, what's the difference? And they would say, well, they would kind of scratch their head, but the overall answer that I kept hearing was craniosacral therapy is kind of like a horse and wagon, and cranial release technique is kind of like a supersonic jet. So I think what they meant by that is, you know, to get from Miami Beach to New York City, I can take a bus, I can ride my bicycle, I can take a jet. All roads may get you there, but to them, they could not believe what could be done in a 1-minute hands-on technique. Whereas a lot of them, they said, I'm used to spending 30, 40, 50 minutes with the client, and I still don't get the results I get now with CRT. So.
Yeah, very
I
interesting comparison, Dr. Doreste. We said that with lymph work. It's involving pathways. It's like choosing what road are you going to take when you get out of your driveway in the morning. How are you going to get there safest in your selection of pathways to get there?
Mhm.
So that's beautiful. And someone also asked for them if they were going to be certified in the technique and use it, what would be the best way for them to market it?
Yeah, well,